Hello and welcome once again to another episode of Jammin' Dude's Neighborhood and my fifth, yes, with the EP, fifth, in a series of Riverside album reviews. This one focusing on my all-time favorite, Anno, Domini High Definition ADHD. This was the Riverside album for me. What could I possibly say about this amazing album? Whenever anybody asks me which Riverside album should I start with when I'm trying to suggest this amazing band to somebody, I say start right here. This, first of all, my co-host. As you can tell, I've been kicking back with this one for a little while. I had to drink this one in. I love this album so much. This album is 5 songs and 44 minutes and 44 seconds of sheer Riverside perfection. I love every note on this album. This was the album that when I bought it and put it in the player, 6 months later, it was still stuck in my CD player. I couldn't get enough of it. I'm still recovering from that. That's why everything's been running a little bit behind, but I'm going to get caught up here. But let's head straight into it with Hyperactive. I hope my sell-by date didn't expire yesterday. Boy, that's the way I feel sometimes. And dial search accept. I mean, all these moments, I'm not just reciting lyrics. These are musical moments on the album that just grab you right away. Right out of the gate. This album just has you by the guts. Oh, you know. So, of course, the album has that, everything that you love in a classic album, with the very first song grabbing you right out of the gate. But it doesn't let up. Because immediately we go into Driven to Destruction. And with its Tool-like bass riff, Maria's really sets the stage for the mood of this album. Because with Hyperactive, we've started off very high energy. And now we've gone into something that's a little bit more of a groove. But it's... I know something wrong. I know there's something wrong with me. It's this internal pressure. We're all feeling it. We're on this pressure from the outside world. And yet we're hearing this buzz inside of our own head, and we know that something's not right. So there's this internal unsettling piece that's a little bit more mid-tempo. So I love the Tool homage almost, but really getting more into this groove-oriented and pummeling you forward. So again, we have all the makings of this classic album with this hook, high energy first song, and then this song, this second song that just grabs you in with a nice groove and settles you into something, and then after that, we get the crown jewel, in my opinion, of the entire album, Egoist Hedonist. And the 3 sections of this album just set everything up so perfectly, because what we're seeing now is Riverside, who have been experimenting with several different angles through the first 3 Reality Dream albums, right? So we've heard a mellow, a more metal, and then a sort of off-kilter experimental, and now we're hearing everything that Riverside has become up to this point, and it's all being culminated and streamlined, and everything is just firing on all cylinders. Everybody is doing their thing. Maria's writing is top-notch. Piot's guitar playing is amazing, and now we're really hearing the keyboardist, Michel. He's bringing his soundscapes to the forefront. And when I hear this mellow intro for Egoist Hedonist, and you're immediately picturing yourself in this crowd, and you hear it all around you. And you hear our main character stopping, as if he defies this audience to keep him from, he defies, he's not going to move with them, but it's like, it's in the middle of the crowd, but you hear this marching, as it were, and everybody's moving along, and he suddenly stops, and he's not going to be a part of it, but they're going to try to force him to become part of this dance. And as it comes down the stretch, the amazing tension that's built just blows my doors off, because by the end, they've convinced him to go back into this dance, but the ending riff is amazing. You guys all know what I'm talking about if you've heard that ending riff. That is just an amazing part, and again, Egoist Hedonist to me is probably my all-time favorite Riverside song, period, from anything, anywhere. But I like that we get Piot's soaring guitar through the middle section, Hedonist Party, and then we get the keyboard soundscapes down the last part, the Strawman Dance. I haven't memorized the parts yet. I only know the songs. But so we're getting everybody coming together so perfectly. And then, so the first half of the album, we end up with these 3 shorter pieces, and now we end on 2 epics, because then we go to Left Out, which again has this beautiful setup at the beginning. We're starting off the second half of the album with this mellow breather, and then it just continues to build tension. And then I love that part, the guitar part that Piot creates throughout the center. Na 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 na. Did anybody else notice, while I'm almost feel like I'm skipping over it, we're getting a little bit more Middle Eastern flavor through some of this, not only in Driven to Destruction and in Egoist Hedonist. I mean, aren't we getting almost a little bit of a Middle Eastern swing waltz flavor? But I mean, in all of it, I just hear it a little bit more on this album than I have on past albums. And then we get to the final epic of Hybrid Times, and I just love the way that this entire album is set up. I'm trying to keep this one a little shorter just because I remember that I ranted so long about Rampant Eye Movement that I ended up turning it into a 15-minute episode, and I don't really want it to be that long, but I get so excited talking about ADHD because there's so many great parts in this album. But these are the moments when it feels really good to be a music fan, because you guys all know what I'm talking about. I want you to tell me about your favorite parts of ADHD. But the Hybrid Times, again, where we get down to that angry part near the end where it's like again, again, and then after that extremely high tension stop-start part, then the whole album almost ends on like a 2-minute fade out, with Michelle just creating this, and it's a great soliloquy to bring us out of this album, because we have such great tension building and then bringing it back down to the mellow parts so perfectly. And the way that the album fades out is such a perfect blend of all the emotions that we've culminated on this album. So the album starts perfectly, it centers perfectly, it ends perfectly. This is a perfect Riverside album. And I seem to remember that during the interviews for this album, Mary has talked about how they intentionally tried to keep this a little shorter, like to classic album length. And I noticed that at 44 minutes, this album still could fit on a single record and not suffer for sound quality. Like with many modern day albums, you're pushing an hour, and if you try to fit on a single record, you'd be getting a half an hour aside, and you'd really be sacrificing sound quality. But they really went for a classic album sound. And this album could have been released in the record era and been very comfortable as a single album. It's a perfect punch. They've compacted everything that Riverside is into this single moment. And so I really applaud them. I don't think that they would ever outdo this, but Riverside never, ever, ever has done a bad album. But this, to me, was certainly the peak of their craft. And I could listen to this album forever. This is easily in my top 10 desert island discs of all time. I absolutely love this album, and I never get sick of listening to it. And when I was listening to it tonight, I was just giddy all over again. And the album is years old. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for being so patient with me. Life's been a circus here, dealing with sickness and family issues. My mother-in-law, who we take care of course, I think I said was in the hospital with pneumonia. She's home now. She's doing better. So I thank you for everybody who has said their support. That's kind of put me behind, but we'll get caught up because I'll do a midweek episode for Memories in My Head when we get to it. But thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all to Riverside for such an incredible career of music, and here's to more in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you from the Black Russian, and we will see you next time on Jammin' Dude's Neighborhood.